So good afternoon, everyone again. My name is Toma Berlanda, and I'll be chairing this session, Whose Shared Heritage. We're running it in the plenary venue because one presentation is in French and to allow the interpretation. I understand that the two presenters, Thomais Kordonouri and Dr. Harriet McKay, have asked to play a video. Is that correct?
Hello, from me,
Hi.
this is fine. I can also present live. What is better for you?
Right, no, if you're happy to present, we'll be delighted to have you present. I was just trying to clarify because I've been told by the organizers that there were some videos to be played and hence they were suggesting postponing you, but if you're happy to do it,
I'm happy. I just send it as a backup plan in case I have internet connections.
Absolutely fantastic. So no change to the order. We go with what is presented. Thanks, Harriet. Harriet, am I correct? You are happy to stand where you are if in terms of the requirements for the video presentation?
Absolutely, and I may as well leave it as a video as it's there. Like Thomais, I kind of gave it as a backup, but let's play it and then I can talk to you live after it's been played.
Perfect. So we'll do like that. We'll follow the order as is scheduled. And then my suggestion is that we leave the questions for the end so that we can try to have a real conversation among the presenters. So allow me to give the floor to our first speaker, Tomas Cordonery. I believe she's an architect with a research master's from UCL, currently practicing in Zurich. So who's going to talk about Asmara's architectural heritage as a bricolage, please.
Right, thank you very much. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, very much so.
Okay, thank you very much. So hello everyone again. My name is Thomais Kordonouri and I'm a recent graduate of the Bartlett School of Architecture at the University College London and currently working in Zurich. My presentation addresses the issue of the heritage as bricolage of architecture of the others and local architecture in the city of Asmara, which is defined by the encounters of the past to modernism. It is a talk occasioned by a field trip to Eritrea in the framework of the Masters in Architecture and Historic Urban Environments of the Bartlett School of Architecture, and the result of research in collaboration with Professor Dr. Edward Denison from UCL and Binian Tem from Asmara Heritage Project. So viewing some Asmara's buildings in light of bricolage, we will first analyze this concept and we will examine the case of St. Mary's Orthodox Cathedral. In the end, we will question UNESCO's rejection of Criterion 3 in relation to Asmara's preservation of indigenous cultural traditions. To begin with, the concept of bricolage, as described by Claude Lévi-Strauss, refers to a process or a skill of reuse of objects in different combinations in order to create something new and construct mythological narratives. Roland Barthes highlighted the characteristics of bricolage, heterogeneous objects that are considered as signs that are classified and conceal a symbolic meaning. These signs may seem as cognitive structures that affect memory and spatial perception. However, it is not only the signs themselves that make the work meaningful, but also the fact that they collide with each other, creating a dialectic, which depends on their classification. Furthermore, signs can be either material or representational for objects that belong to a place before being involved in the bricolage. Through this reuse, the aesthetic of rapture appears that rejects classical coherence, rationality, and homogeneity, emphasizing variety. Finally, an architectural form as a bricolage gives birth to dialogues between memory, materiality, proportions, and styles, bringing out new meanings. These various dialogues of meaning, styles, and bricolages can be read in Asmara's modern heritage as a colonial city that developed its cultural identity through its encounters with numerous civilizations, through trading networks and colonial experiences. Its proximity to the Red Sea connected it to the border of the present-day Ethiopia, associated with assorted civilizations. Among them, they came in contact with Italians, Yemenis, Ottomans, British, Ethiopians, and also other settlers that were established there, such as Greeks, Swedes, Jews, Indians, Armenians, and Sudanese. This explains its cultural, ethnic, and religious diversity and the values of tolerance and unity. In the built environment, these values were marked through the creation of buildings dedicated to various religions, commercial and residential buildings, and public spaces. When the Italians arrived in the end of the 19th century, they chose Asmara to be the capital of what became their African empire, introducing rationalism, Novecento style, monumentalism, and futurism in the African environment. Between 1935 and 1941, it became a city that had a modern plan and modernist architecture. In 1941, the Allied forces entered the city, and the British military administration took control of the Italian colony. In the cultural traditions of Eritrea are included local construction materials that Italians were relied on to build their structures, besides a few imported materials. In particular, they used raw materials such as brick, granite, cement, lime, wood, marble, sandstone, and basalt that were in abundance in Eritrea and absorbed in the new structures. Also, Eritreans possessed the expertise to use them in many different ways that included dry stone walling, quarrying, chiseling, and dressing. The most common material was basalt in Asmara, a hard and impermeable material 30 to 50 centimeters thick that was ideal for foundations and load-bearing walls. Basalt gave to the city's architecture a distinct character. It connects modernism to the genius loci of Asmara. In many cases, it is exposed or presented in a pattern of the facade, while in other instances it is concealed as a thick layer beneath the plaster. Also, other important references or signs are the building typologies and traditional construction techniques that were assimilated in the modern structures and in the end contributed to this creation of the bricolage. These include the hitmo, the actmo, and the aderas. In particular, the hitmo is a typology found only in the Eritrean highlands, recognized by its rectangular form, made of wood, stone, and soil, and covered by a flat extended roof that played the role of a shelter, having an indoor space that is divided into areas. The agdo is a dwelling typology found in most areas of Eritrea and is characterized by its circular plan, measuring 3 meters in diameter. Its walls are only made of stone and soil, and it has a conical glass roof on the top and a 2-room indoor space as well. The 2-story form of the agdo is called aderas, which is a rare form, but where this form exists, this form denotes a religious building or high-ranking individual's house. Both the hitmo and the agdo precede a unique building method that is known as monkey head. Its name comes from the use of protruding, rounded-off wooden cross members or dowels to bind together horizontal layers of wood between layers of stone in a wall, since these protruding dowels resemble the tops of monkeys' heads. This method predated the introduction of lime mortar to Eritrea from Yemen in the mid-17th century. The monkey head technique, which was widely used during the Aksumite period, was designed to connect the wall and provide support while using available resources. Some of the Italians adopted it in their design when they arrived, albeit superficially. Moving now to St. Mary's Orthodox Cathedral, or as the locals call it, Enda Mariam, we see an example of bricolage of Italian rationalism and African vernacular architecture. Its history starts in the 13th century. When Asmara's 4 villages were united, the church occupied the area, and after the Italians arrived, it remained of vital importance to the indigenous Eritrean Orthodox community. The original church was a hitmo, surrounded by a wall and trees, being built with a monkey head technique and topped with an Orthodox cross. As Hocliadi noted in Treani in Eritrea, it resembled more a cave than a temple. The interior was decorated with brightly colored paintings of saints on the walls and stored sacred scriptures. As mentioned before, Italians took the vernacular architecture into consideration, and so in 1920, a new church designed by the architect Ernesto Gallo replaced the main hitmo church. He assimilated in his design the Adera style in the roofs of the 2 towers that were used for storage and were standing at its corner of the church. The main church, rectangular in plan, had the raised central nave. Also, its walls were built with a monkey head technique with dowels of white juniper. Later, in 1938, the architect Giuseppe Malaguti replaced the second church, designing another considerably larger one, following Gallo styles, but simplifying its form. This church consists also of two massive towers at its corner of the main building, between them referring to the Adoras as well. Its construction was not only based in local sources, except reinforcement bars and paints, but it also imitated the construction method of a 4th century church that was excavated in the Eritrean coast in the 19th century, as it can be seen in Enda Mariam's facade, made of layers of stones, slates, and brick. Also, preserving the forms of the previous buildings, the 12-meter tall towers retained its acto roofs, but these were separated from the layered stone by additional vertical openings of concrete, indicating the rationalist character of the church. The main building has many more rationalist features of Lombard architecture, having a rectangular plan with a modern interior with colonnades surrounding the nave. Its ceiling is parallel vaulted with lights at either end that may be seen from outside as a line of semicircular apertures. Moreover, the interior is decorated with colored mosaics illustrating religious figures. These are also illustrated in the vertical frame of the facade in a composition divided into 7 parts, each representing the 7 sacraments of the Orthodox Church and having an Orthodox cross above it. Below the main frame, the stepped frames with the rounded arch doorways signify the main entrance. A large gate and a wall in a similar style to that of the church enclose now the entire compound. This compound includes also another church, which is placed at the front of the periphery and is called De Gesellam. It was built in 1917, designed by the engineer Edoardo Cavagnari. In 1945 to 1946, new rooms were added, so today the current building serves as an office building for the church, and as a construction also indicates many reinstated references to the Eritrean indigenous architecture, such as the conical concrete roofs of the acto placed above its central core of the building and its ends.
Okay.
And walls and pillars that imitate the monkey head technique under the concrete crossbeams. Moreover, the symbolisms are included in the gutters that are made in the head of an animal resembling a leopard, in frescoes of different designs, and in other elements in concrete referring to the first Hidmo church. In 2017, Asmara was inscribed on the World Heritage List of UNESCO. Like most urban sites on the list, it was inscribed under Criterion 2, which is to exhibit an important interchange of human values over a span of time or within a cultural area of the world, on developments in architecture or technology, monumental arts, town planning, or landscape design. Additionally, it was inscribed under Criterion 4, to be an outstanding example of a type of building, architectural or technological ensemble, or landscape which illustrates a significant stage in human history. However, UNESCO rejected Asmara's claims to Criteria 3, to bear a unique or at least exceptional testimony to a cultural tradition or to a civilization which is living or which has disappeared. This endorsement would recognize the significant role of Eritrean cultural traditions in realizing the today's city of Asmara through tangible and intangible features. First of all, these traditions include the ancient practices of construction and local materials, the formation material science of a bricolage, which are integral to Eritrea's unique modernist language. Additionally, it is noteworthy that despite its transformation from an indigenous center of administration to a colonial city and then to a modern capital of an independent country, it did not only retain material continuities and bricolages, but also the intangible qualities of language, cultural values, and national identity remained authentic. In particular, after the post-colonial period that Eritrea underwent a second wave of colonialism under the Ethiopian control, and Ethiopians attempted to destroy Eritreans' national identity, denying local languages and traditions, Asmara became the symbol of Eritrean resistance, representing loss and promise, expressing itself through music, poetry, and theater as its cultural traditions were endangered. Throughout the Cold War, actors, artists, and sculptors considered Asmara as an emblem for the larger quest for national independence. So Asmara fulfills the Criterion 3 through architectures of bricolages that denote the local traditions, and other symbols that expressed its cultural values and traditions while competing other civilizations. To conclude, Asmara is the outstanding value to humanity. Architecturally, it constitutes a totality of modernist structures, but also bricolages that have incorporated indigenous elements of the past. These are historical material elements that are reproduced not only for structural reasons, but also to reinstate vernacular heritage of the area. The Italians recognized Asmara's past and envisioned a distinctive urban landscape relying both to Eritrean labor and to these traditions. The bricolages they created are distinguished by the apportioned forms that indicate plasticity, giving birth to dialogues between materiality, memory, and different styles. So it can be said that Asmara fulfills UNESCO's criteria 3, responding with a preservation of its traditions that are connotated through intangible traditions and symbols, such as art, and tangible, such as these buildings bricolages, which in the end bring out new meanings. Together, they shape an authentic heritage, not of Europe, but of Africa. At this point, I would like to thank Biniam Tema from Asmara Heritage Project for his contribution and collaboration, and Professor Edward Denison from UCL for the supervision and the inspiration. And thank you all very much for the attention.
Thank you, Thomais, for the presentation. I'm going to invite now the second presenter. I'm trying to follow in the chat. Franck, Privat GONNÉ. See if he's here. It doesn't seem to be in the room. Franck GONNÉ. So if that's not possible, I think we take the third one in our schedule, and then if Franck GONNÉ arrives, we'll place him later. The third is a joint presentation by Pottgiesser, Uduku, Kuukuwa, Manful, Taibat, Lawanson, and Olweny. And I've been told that Mark will make the presentation. Is that true?
That is correct, Toma. Let me see if I can share my screen.
Nice to see you. To you.
Good afternoon. So let me see how I can do this. First of all.
And while you get ready, just Olga, thanks for the question in the chat. My suggestion is we try to capture all the questions and organize a little bit of conversation after the three presentations, if that's okay.
Okay. So,
Mark?
Yes.
Is it working?
It is working. Can you see it on your screen?
Yes.
Fantastic. Now I just have to get back to mine, which has mysteriously disappeared. Okay. Thank you very much to the organizers of the Modern Heritage of Africa conference. This talk is geared to outline a project that's really at its beginning phases and geared to start by the end of 2021. And its key goals really are to look closer at modern urban history and heritage in order to learn from it, and more importantly, to promote sustainable urban and social development through documentation and conservation of built cultural heritage, specifically engaging with African projects and African initiatives. So the project partners are quite diverse, and that's important for a project like this. So as part of the exploration, did it actually move forward? It's not supposed to have done that. Okay, so the project partners are from across Europe and Africa, and they include Architect Tool, which is based in Estonia, different chapters of Docomomo, so including Docomomo International. We've got Docomomo Germany and Docomomo in Accra, as well as the Center for Housing and Sustainable Development at the University of Lagos. Jean Moltier from Berlin, who is an architectural photographer with Bauhaus, the Manchester School of Architecture, where Ula Uduku is based, and the Faculty of the Built Environment in Uganda, which I'm representing today. So as part of this exploration, which is really primarily about capacity building, is really acknowledging that the ability to engage with heritage is having an understanding of its value. And so therefore a core goal of the project is related to this. And it has these three key goals as part of that. The first one is to increase knowledge and build capacity in cultural heritage, which is related to the fact that to be able to engage with heritage protection and heritage understanding, you actually need to have a number of people who understand what that means within the context in which they're working. This is primarily directed at architecture and urbanism students, but could go as far as geography, history, and other related organizations as well. The second one is about partnerships and the ability to garner sponsorship as well. So to be able to engage with these, you do need to be able to access people from around the world, experts in the various fields, and as well as building capacity of East, North-South, as well as South-South participation or partnerships. And in this particular project, we are trying to build capacity across Africa. So the projects are based in East Africa and West Africa, which is an important part of building a project like this. And the last one, of course, is being able to participate and integrate what we're doing into a project as well. So digitization, integrating these different design disciplines together to produce documentation that can be used to go forward in these projects and in future work that needs to be done. The project itself, Shared Heritage of Africa, Rediscovering Masterpieces, focus on rediscovering largely post-modern buildings, post-war modernist buildings from generally the 1950s to the 1970s. There's a bit of a bleed across from the 1970s and sometimes into the 1980s. But these generally fall in the period just after independence and the first 2-3 decades after the end of colonial rule. And in all cases, it's generally from the United Kingdom. So we have Ghana in 1957, we have Nigeria in 1960, and we have Uganda in 1962. So they do have very similar trajectories, which makes the exploration that we're trying to do fit together neatly, which also helps make this actually much easier to deal with, rather than going across regions, which will be probably a next phase that we're engaging with. One focus, of course, is looking very specifically at university buildings in this case. And the reason for that is universities have retained a lot of this original built heritage in an untouched form, which makes it actually useful to look at and is a very good basis for these projects, because there's usually a very large collection of different buildings across a university campus that can be looked at as part of the exploratory phase of this, relating back to the capacity building, which means that we have a lot to actually work with. So the case studies we're looking at are spread around the region. As I said, in Ghana, we have one university, which we're all very familiar with, the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, which was the first university built in Ghana in 1952, and is very significant in a lot of ways, and this becomes part of that important narrative. In Nigeria, we have three: the University of Lagos. We have a branch of that, which is the Enegu branch of the University of Lagos, which was originally the Nigerian College of Arts, Science and Technology, which is from 1950s. We also have the University of Jos, which is a university in the center of Nigeria itself. And in Uganda, we have two universities, Busitama University, which was originally a National College of Agricultural Mechanization, which is in 1968. And then we have Kyambogo University, which was the original Uganda Technical College when it split from Makerere University. And this campus was built in 1958. The interesting one about the last two there is that they represent what could be viewed as a forgotten heritage, which comes from the links with the non-aligned movement and the Eastern Bloc countries. In this case, both of them were part of the donation from the Soviet Union. So just quickly having a look at some of these images for our purpose here. We have Kumasi University of Science and Technology in the top left, University of Lagos main auditorium in the center there, Kumasi University's, I think that was science lab, and the Kyambogo University's main arts faculty. And then of course we have, just quickly on the right of the screen there, we have a building from Kenya that we present as one of these flagship buildings that was designed by Ernst May, which was part of the Aga Khan High School. The methods that we're looking at related to the goals of this project really are a series of engagements with postgraduate students. And these include a writing workshop, which is based on a series of projects spearheaded by one of the collaborators on this current project, Ola Uduku, which has been hosting a number of writing workshops in the context of West Africa. And this is important because being able to produce documentation requires engagement with writing, not only for the local context, but also international, and how to frame information in a way that is meaningful for the projects that we're working on. The second part of this is an engagement with photography or architectural photography, which is a quite a specialized field. Although we have a lot of cell phones with cameras on them, architectural photography needs a little bit more nuancing, and we'll be providing this with Jean Molter, who will be doing a series of workshops to help people engage with architectural photography. We also look at publishing, and publishing is a way of getting information out in various forms to various categories of people. So Architect Tool will be responsible for this, working with the blogs that they have, as well as expanding beyond that. And then, of course, we understand that all this is about engaging with architectural assessment as well, and embedded within that will be a series of workshops geared to helping the various participants understand the issues that need to be looked at in depth so that they can build capacity in what needs to be documented, how future maintenance could be done, what is needed for conservation and rehabilitation of buildings if and when that is necessary. So out of these explorations, what we're looking forward to producing at the end of this are 4 key outputs. The first one, of course, relates to what we previously talked about, the online blog, where we can get information out quickly and easily in a form and a platform that is accessible to most people. So it's an open platform on Architect Tool, which is currently online. Currently it's in German for the most part, but we'll be running an English-based component for this particular project. We'll also be looking to build on DocoMoMo's publications in terms of journals and books in related to this heritage element of the project. DocoMoMo is a key part of this project, and they have a large collection of publications of which this will become a part of that archive. Significantly also is being able to get an exhibition or a roving exhibition that will be hosted by Goethe Institutes around the world. And the wonderful thing about the Goethe Institutes is they generally have exhibition space or display space in many of these countries across Africa, Asia, and the Americas. So an exhibition space already exists. We just have to tailor whatever we're doing to fit in those spaces. But that it's an important one because there is a ready place for this to happen. And then lastly, of course, a conference that brings together not only the partners of the project, but also external partners interested in heritage and interested in maintaining buildings and increasing the narrative around them. And so to finish off, really, I'll just present the key authors of this. From Ghana, we have Manful Kuukuwa, who is based in Docomomo, Accra, myself, Uganda Martyrs University, Uduku from Manchester Metropolitan University, Taibat, Lawanson from University of Lagos, and the key proponent of this project, Uta Pottgiesser from Germany, who unfortunately could not be here for this particular presentation. We also have Jean Montier, who is a key photographer, who will be running the photography studios in this, and of course, Christian Burkhardt from architecture as well. So the project itself is in its planning phases. And so we're just using this as a platform to give colleagues a preview of what is going to be done to help build momentum for the project over the next 2 years. And to hopefully, when this particular conference series moves on to the next phase, we'll have a more detailed exploration of the specific projects and the outcomes as well. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Toma.
Thank you, Mark, for the intriguing presentation, sort of sketching the frame of what you and colleagues will be busy over the next foreseeable future. I'm being told that we are now joined by Franck Privat GONNÉ. Franck?
Yes. Donc,
bon après-midi.
Merci. Bonjour.
Ça
en tout
va?
cas, oui, ça va bien. J'ai eu une grosse difficulté à me connecter via mon ordinateur là. Donc,
connect with my computer. I'm connected on my phone now, and I'll do my presentation as best as I can on my phone, so that the technician can project my PowerPoint. I'll ask Jack to help you. Then you'll be able to speak directly to us. Is it okay now? Can you see the presentation now?
Frank, the presentation is on.
Franck, vous pouvez commencer.
OK.
Okay, fine. I would like to thank you to give me the occasion to present the result of my research. And this research has been done for my master. The title is The Urban Heritage of Greater Abidjan and Alexandria, Attractiveness and Repulsion. Alexandria in Egypt. The Greater Abidjan, in the second slide. Second slide, please. Already, regarding the Greater Abidjan, it's a community, there's 19 communities. We work on the first three capitals, Grand Bassam, Gingerville, and the Greater Abidjan. The aim of our work is to make sure that the urban heritage is at the key of our research, and how it is important for a town or region. Slide 3, please. Next slide. Therefore, if we have chosen this topic, it's because those two capitals, those two cities, have got similar characters. Both are cosmopolitan cities. Alexandria, for us, it's 19th and 20th century we are interested in. Alexandria is very cosmopolitan, many communities, Italian, etc., Greek, and more or less most people from the Mediterranean. In Côte d'Ivoire, you have got people from Mali, Niger, Ghana, so it's very cosmopolitan as well, Abidjan. At this level, those two communities have got similar characteristics. They are open on the sea, on the Med, and for the Côte d'Ivoire, the Atlantic Ocean. As far as the cities, I've been trading cities which were very important in those times. They have been founded by personalities or eminent people who wanted to make their cities showcase cities. Next slide. For Alexandria, we have got the historical session of powerful people, Muhammad Ali, Ismail Pasha is going to bring foreign architects who are going to bring new form, new shapes to the city. And that's why the style is very eclectic, is very varied. After Mohammed, we have Ismail Pasha. And after that, on the 20th century, we'll have Nasser, will nationalize everything. Regarding Côte d'Ivoire, we have got the first president who was very conscious of the modernity existing, and we have the colonial part, and out of that came out a new form of architecture, and it gave to Abidjan a new face, as we will see soon. Next slide, please. Here you have got the evolution, architectural evolution for Alexandria. You can see the various forms, the various styles, from Venetian style to Art Deco, and for Abidjan, for Grand Bassin, you have got on the bottom slide, you can see the colonial period with the verandas in the house, in front of the houses. And the first president wanted to give to his country a business center that we call the Plateau in Abidjan. That's the period the post-colonial period, 1960, 1980. And then he was looking to attract the whole world, literally, to come to Abidjan and do business. However, the spirit of modernity is going to carry on, in fact, with a new project we're going to see projects and programs of a new shape in Alexandria, just like in Greater Abidjan. We have got new urban planning taking place, which are more focused on urban mobility. Then we are going to see more projects dealing with communication, transport, and cleaning the city, and that sort of thing. Next slide, please. Presently, we have got a big project going on. We have got the tourism great plan for Alexandria. We have got a development national plan, and the Egyptian state is starting a new project, big new project with a new capital and a new museum in Cairo as well. The country didn't want to open. There was a creation of Egypt Voice to Africa. That's a new initiative the government of the Egyptian government. It's Egypt Voice in Africa, which is going to take place at the expense of heritage. Next slide, please.
Next slide, please.
At the expense of the heritage, in the left and right, you can, no, it says left on top. You're going to see the House of Heritage, or the Cultural Heritage in Grand Bassin, which is a historical town. That's where there is an organization who is supposed to protect the heritage, but as you can see, it's not in very good shape. It was a colonial house, which is totally overgrown. In Alexandria, vous avez la Ville à Jean, which also has been half demolished. Also the house of the writer Laurence Durel case has been destroyed. We can see that the heritage, despite the will to modernize, the will of modernity, despite all those features, it looks like the urban heritage hasn't been looked after. No, seeing that, we wanted to know how heritage can help the development of the town. Next slide, please. Next slide again, please. We adopted a methodology, which means we had a number of consultation, case studies, in order to verify the trends and what to do, what is requested. Next slide. Well, the first result we got, the result of per region from 2010 to 2021, we realized that Alexandria, people online were more interested in, showed their interest for Alexandria. And you have got Abidjan in Africa, in France. That's where the population, according to the people online, normally look for destination. You know, when they do their searches online, that's where that's the countries they're interested in. Next slide, please. For Greater Abidjan, we did a French questionnaire, and we got 33 answers. And it's a start, but the results are rather interesting. We had 2 interviews with architects. We are interviews on link regarding the questionnaire. The population we consulted think there must be more effort around urban heritage. It's important to develop the urban heritage for tourism, for tourist routes. Is urban policy, are the urban policies encouraging the preservation of heritage or not? And the people answered negatively. Regarding the attributes of the attractiveness of a territory, we ask which are the attractiveness attribute of those territories in that questionnaire. Grand Bassam, the attractiveness is the cultural and historical places which have been chosen by the people online. Same for Bingerville. And for Abidjan, it was more the people online chose places where you can enjoy yourself or you can go shopping.
Next slide, please.
Next slide, please. Regarding the initiative for Greater Abidjan, the initiative are not enough. There is not enough interest for the urban heritage of the Greater Abidjan. Bingerville and Grand Bassam are more studies, and also regarding tourism as well. There's not much interest by the tourist agencies. Regarding Alexandria, we had various questionnaires in French, English, and Arabic, and we had various interviews with the chair of the Tour Guide Association.
Jacques or Janet, can you put the next slide on, please? Thanks.
OK, donc au niveau d'Alexandrie, les enquêtés ont présenté comme attribut d'Alexandrie plus le climat, le coût de la vie, les lieux culturels et historiques. Et aussi comme attribut la gastronomie et la langue. Mais au niveau des initiatives en faveur du patrimoine urbain, on note qu'il y a au moins à Alexandrie un nombre élevé d'initiatives et d'outils de médiation autour du patrimoine. Déjà, le Centre d'études alexandrine, M. Alex, organise chaque année la journée du patrimoine alexandrin, occasion durant laquelle le centre fait des conférences, des visites guidées, des ateliers. Au niveau étatique, nous avons plusieurs projets réunis au sein de ce qu'on va intituler Memories of the City, qui est décliné en trois activités. Et next slide, Jacques. Next slide, please. Donc, décliné en plusieurs activités. Vous allez voir après un tableau récapitulatif de toutes les initiatives et outils qu'on a au niveau d'Alexandrie, qui vont du DVD, des toolbooks, des cartes illustrées, des ouvrages. En termes d'ouvrages, il y en a assez. Et des mallettes pédagogiques. Donc, c'est toute une panoplie d'outils et d'initiatives qui sont menées au niveau d'Alexandrie. Chose pour dire qu'il y a au sein, bien que cela se fasse au sein de la population et au sein du monde de la recherche, il y a plus de, on pourrait dire qu'il y a plus une conscience patrimoniale à Alexandrie que pour le cas du Grand Abidjan. Next slide, please. Jacques. Oh. Next slide. Okay, next again. OK. L'un des éléments au niveau, bien que certains ouvrages et documents pour le cas de Bingerville, du Grand Abidjan, Bassam, Bingerville et Abidjan lui-même est totalement localisé. Pour le cas d'Alexandrie, nous avons décliné principalement la présence du patrimoine urbain en 4 grandes zones. C'est vrai que le patrimoine urbain alexandrin est, comme on pourrait dire, vieux de plusieurs siècles, mais comme nous l'avons dit, notre sujet ici traite du 19e et du 20e siècle, et ce sont ces zones-là où on peut trouver effectivement des bâtiments, des monuments, des parcs naturels, des lieux de mémoire qui sont de cette période-là. Next slide. OK, là vous pouvez voir, vous avez un aperçu du patrimoine urbain. On a choisi 4 éléments. Palais du gouverneur de Bingerville, qui est aujourd'hui l'orphelinat de garçons. On a le monument Trèche-la-Peine qui est à Grand Bassam. On a l'entrée du stade d'Alexandrie et l'ancien club Mohamed Ali, qui est aujourd'hui le centre de créativité d'Alexandrie. Donc, d'un côté, vous avez deux éléments du patrimoine urbain de Côte d'Ivoire et de l'autre, vous avez celui d'Alexandrie. Next slide, please. Donc, de tout cela, nous avons fait des recommandations, histoire de donner des pistes de réflexion. Et entre autres, nous avons voulu nous souhaitons que, tant au niveau d'Alexandrie qu'au niveau du Grand Abidjan, on puisse faire des cercles de réflexion, mais multi-acteurs, parce que ce qui se fait, ce qu'on remarque des deux côtés, on a tendance à d'avoir des comités d'experts qui n'intègrent pas soit des personnes qui sont en lien avec ces différents territoires. On attend l'idée de rester toujours entre professionnels des différents domaines sur en fait cette dynamique de qui doit aboutir à un marketing territorial. Et entre autres, on a voulu que on puisse harmoniser les outils de communication, les supports communicationnels, tant au niveau de Grand Abidjan que d'Alexandrie, proposer ce que le Grand Abidjan puisse candidater au label de ville créative, tout comme à Alexandrie, et faire en sorte que ces villes-là puissent faire partie des grands réseaux comme l'AMF pour les villes francophones et bien d'autres. Donc, sur ce, je tiens à vous remercier et vous dire encore merci parce que même si ça a été speed, vous remercier pour l'attention que vous avez accordée à ma présentation. Merci, merci.
Merci Franck et merci d'avoir affronté cette challenge informatique. So thank you everyone for coping with the logistical challenges. Without any further ado, I think we're going to invite Dr. Harriet McKay to her presentation and then try to wrap up with a conversation before 3. Over to you, Harriet.
Hello, everyone. Jacques, are you there and able to play the presentation for me, please? Thank you for inviting me. It's a real privilege to be here with everyone, and the chance to talk about things African is all too rare somehow from the UK, from where I work at least. Okay, so here is the start of my presentation. I'll shut up and then be back to answer questions. Thanks, Jack. I want to introduce this talk about the curious case of the Satyagraha house, which is part museum, part guest house. I want to introduce this by offering an experience that might not seem immediately relevant, but which has informed my curatorial thinking over the years and has come to the fore again in terms of responding to the call for papers and participation in this African Modern Heritage Conference. The experience I had was that years ago, when applying for a job in the UK that would include curating various artifacts from across sub-Saharan Africa, I went to seek the advice of a colleague who worked at the British Museum. This turned out to be a big mistake, but a useful one. I realized when she described working on an advisory panel set up by the British Museum, this advisory panel being in Nairobi and designed in her words to train East African museum professionals, I realized that she and I came from pretty different positions. For her, this was simply how the world worked. According to some inherently received natural order of things, the British curator would inevitably be a huge and valuable asset in providing an education, again, not my word, for their African counterparts. The shock of encountering this ethos in 2011, as it was at the time, has remained with me, and as I say, has come to the fore in the context of this conference and has underpinned the writing of this short talk. For sure, the UK museum and heritage landscape offers the insights gained through long-lived museological and heritage practice. Let's not forget, though, that these are occupations in the UK that include rightly disputed and highly contentious issues, of course. Even as I write this paper, the question as to whether the British Museum will do the right thing and return the looted Benin bronzes to their proper home, this is once more in the news. Longevity doesn't necessarily equate to best practice. It's with these and other issues around decoloniality and also of audience in mind, as well as questions around whose archaeological or curatorial histories we're sharing when considering modern African heritage, these issues have informed my putting together this short presentation. And while, as you've seen from my title, the curious case of Satyagraha is the focus of the talk, I want to suggest that the building and its contents provide as much a vehicle for addressing wider museological philosophies, as I'll do, as they do to offer a site for exploring modern African heritage per se. On a warm late summer evening in March 2019, I found myself being guided up the path of the beautifully lit Satyagraha garden towards the main building in the complex, Mohandas Gandhi's former home. More popularly known as Gandhi House, he lived there in 1908 to 1909 in what's now Orchards, Johannesburg. The air was laden with a curious mix of frangipani and paraffin from the lamps lighting the garden paths. It was nothing if not heavily atmospheric. But was this ambience over authenticity, I wondered, and if so, did it matter? My stay at Satyagraha House came at the tail end of a research trip made around an entirely different building. I was currently working on Ponte City Apartments, or Vodacom Tower, in Berea, Joburg, a building that has an important B rating on South Africa's Heritage Register. Ponte was built in 1975, and on the face of it, of course, couldn't be more different from the Satyagraha House and its aesthetic. And yet I realized both buildings have a key issue in common in terms of my research. In both instances, I was after, if it doesn't sound too entirely pompous, after how to get at the so-called truth about each building. In the Ponte context, I tried to steer a path around its having been labelled Tower of Terror, vertical slum, and so on. This demonization really doesn't tell its full story. But similarly with the Satyagraha House, how might I uncover the truth, if such a thing existed, in this context? And in this context, thinking about truth seemed particularly appropriate. The home of the Mahatma, for whom, in his own words, there is no higher God than truth. How might the various narratives that the house enshrined be played out here, I'd wanted to know. I'd been drawn to stay at Gandhi's house, his South African home, as I say, in 1908 to 9, since the venue, as mentioned, proclaims itself to be at one and the same time both museum and a guest house. How would this work, I wondered. The prim British curator in me worried over the propriety of allowing guests to live amongst museum contents, and how might authenticity, as I've mentioned, be maintained in this instance? For one thing, given that by 1908 already Gandhi's devotion to a strict asceticism was coming to the fore, how could this be accommodated, curated, alongside the need to make comfortable the modern paying guest? The building, the original corral as it was called, the building was designed by Gandhi's close friend, the young German architect Hermann Kallenbach, pictured here. It was designed in 1907. In 2011, following the purchase by the French tourism company Voyage du Monde, the restored house, a new outlying building.
C'est appelé Voyage du Monde, qui a restauré certaines parties.
Satyagraha House website, its homepage shown here, announces renovations overseen by a team comprising a historian, a curator, an architect, 2 interior designers, and their respective teams have restored the original spirit of the house, bringing back an important page in the history of both South Africa and Mohandas Gandhi. The Satyagraha House is now a registered part of the country's historical heritage and presents an innovative accommodation concept linking guest house to museum. Well, in fact, I'd argue that there's very little museum, as I understand the word, actually present at the Satyagraha House. Whilst the original corral buildings do contain explanatory displays and didactic information, its contents aren't strictly authentic and certainly not site-specific. They're also the occasion for a certain amount of set dressing, I would argue. The attic room in which Gandhi slept and which is viewable has been dressed with a suitable and literally low-key floor mattress and modest furnishings. But if you can see in the photo on the right, there's the pair of round wire-frame spectacles carefully placed on the bookrest. They do seem to be a bit theatrical for me. The contents of these rooms were sourced during renovations. At Satyagraha, I'd argue, the interior designer on the team has been at least, if not more important, as the curator or archaeologist in realizing the project. In other rooms, furniture has been sourced from antique vendors in India. All is really very beautiful. Indeed, it comes as no surprise that the house has received at least as much, if not more, attention from interior decoration media, as far as I've discovered, as it has from the museum and curatorial press. In fact, to stay in the house, and here's an image of one of the modern guest rooms, to stay in the house is to occupy a Visi centerfold. I highlight these juxtapositions because, according to my UK-based heritage training, authenticity and the supposed sanctity of the building stroke object is key, and this is what I want to question. How much does the curious mix of modern heritage of Africa at Satyagraha matter? Subjects of real interest to me, not just because it is so compelling, this early history of Gandhi's forming before he returned to India in South Africa, nor is it just of interest because this is such a visually stunning experience. But I'm really interested in the house because it causes me to reflect on my own prejudices and assumptions. Might it not be appropriate that the house in which the Mahatma began to think about decolonization, the house occupied him in the years shortly before South Africa's own independence, might it not be that this offers an alternative approach for modern African heritage? Income and maintenance, preservation, education, information are all provided by Satyagraha's mixed status. Above all, a building that's important to the histories of three countries on three separate continents, India, the UK, and South Africa, has been preserved. I don't know what future lay in store for the house had it not been bought by Voyage du Monde, and that's something that colleagues might be able to fill me in on. I'm also not sure that I've managed to resolve for myself questions around the probity of the Satyagraha house approach. What I do feel, though, is that in the end, my uncertainty lies not so much over matters of centred or decentered curatorial approaches, but in an even more universal theme. On the one hand, so long as the public is nowhere misled or misinformed as to evidence and authenticity, then I increasingly tend towards viewing the initiative positively. On the other hand, imperatives around access are surely critical. To live up to the museum's mission, so proudly stated by Voyage du Monde, shouldn't the house be available to all, at least from time to time? Just how equitable access might be accommodated alongside the needs of the paying guests is, of course, a really difficult question. But it is one, I think, that needs to be resolved in order that the house not simply be a shrine for wealthy tourists to visit. Were this to remain the case, the colonial can still be read to be present. And salient issues from the time, the pass laws and other apartheid politics of early 20th century would remain unchallenged. At Satyagraha House, here lies a contradiction for me, a contradiction of British poet John Keats' 1819 line, "Beauty is truth, truth beauty." To do its job properly as a museum, does the Satyagraha House, this monument to truth force, in fact need to speak rather more loudly and to a far wider audience of the less palatable, of the ugly, of the context in which Gandhi was living and working in here. But this is a question for all those concerned with the modern heritage of Africa who are working in South Africa and not from the UK to decide.
Thanks, Harriet, for the presentation and contribution to the discussion. I'm aware that we have a very short time frame within which to have the conversation, which doesn't help. But I do want to go back to this afternoon's first presentation by Thomais Kordonouri, and specifically allow her to address a question that was in the chat by Olga of Bialystoka. And in the meantime, also would like all the presenters, if they're available, to put on their videos so that we can have a more face-to-face conversation. Thomais, I hope you can see the question in the chat.
Yes, yes, thank you. I was also waiting for the discussion to reply. So I guess also Mentani and Dr. Edward Denison can join this discussion. So what I assume is that UNESCO has probably based the inscriptions under the fact how they define modernism. And I guess it is mostly based on the perspective of the European modernism. So I guess this is why the criterion number 3 is not recognized yet.
Toma, I'm happy to come in if there's a brief moment. Medhani, I don't know if your internet is working, if you want to say anything. This is one of the problems of dealing with UNESCO from Eritrea, is the internet is not working. But in his absence, since I was involved in the nomination, I mean, I think it speaks to the heart of the. Oh, actually, Medhani, your hand is up. You go first. Medhani, okay. Salamat.
Yeah, are you hearing me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Hello. So, okay, thank you so much for the opportunity you gave me. So I'm very happy to meet you all. So anyway, I would like also to express my appreciation for Thomais for her presentation. So concerning the St. Mary Church, anyway, she explained in her presentation. So I think there is a fusion of vernacular Eritrean traditional architectures with a modern European Italian architectures. So it's really, this is one of a good example of the two Africans with Europeans fusion of architectures. So besides the St. Mary Church, the construction technique, it's really, it's a unique, very traditional, and on the building also it was reflected well. Apart, this is types of technique, construction technique, since four eddies in Adulis and some archaeological finding, you can find it, such kind of technique in Eritrea and some part of northern Ethiopia. So I would like just to give some insight about the buildings, and on top of that also the intangible element of it, especially the architects, the designer, when they design, they thoroughly study the Orthodox Church religious functional requirements, and basically one of the most livable buildings in Asmara. So the culture, the religious, the symbolic aspect of it also is a very unique one. So it's really, in terms of exceptional or uniqueness of the buildings is unquestionable. So concerning the criteria 3, when we apply for the nomination dossier, so I think more the UNESCO didn't accept it because of we didn't explain it well, like criteria 2 and criteria 4. That is the reason for the rejection of criteria 3. So the ICOMOS and the advisory bodies, they request for additional further research to justify criteria 3 in the tangible element. That's the reason. Okay, thank you so much for you. Okay.
Thank you for the explanation, which I think was really useful. And I think it makes sense to go, maybe, I know Harriet is now typing, but maybe she can respond.
Oh, I'm here.
Yes,
I'm here.
to the question.
That's a really good question, and it's something that I've been up against so often. I used to work for the National Trust in the UK, and this question around authenticity was something that came up all the time. And I think the way that I have thought and resolved this in my mind is that ideally we want authenticity, but we also want to educate, and we also want to make accessible. And sometimes authenticity isn't possible. For example, one of the house I used to curate, which was Modern Movement building in London, the book collection, because it was 20th century paperbacks and glues, actually much harder to preserve than 18th century books, for example, so much less sturdy with those friable kind of paperback bindings. And so we decided we wouldn't be authentic, but we needed to show the book collection. We couldn't be authentic because of the preservation issues. And what I arrived at, I think, as a result of that experience is that if we want to make what we do, the places we care for and preserve, accessible. I think that's my huge goal. We want to make them accessible for all. So in the case of Satyagraha, for example, it's that question of accessibility or lack of that I mind. What I think is imperative is that we don't mislead, that we don't misinform, and we don't create a situation, as I think Satyagraha is in danger of doing, where it does slightly err on the side of misleading. And we spoke earlier before lunch about heritage as commodity. Well, these Satyagraha House are selling a kind of vision, and it's not an authentic vision. But you know, if I think about, say, Mandela's cell on Robben Island, is the mattress that's on the floor there authentic? I don't know. Or is it set dressing? In all that, but having that mattress there, whether it's authentic or not, is really important, because it talks about that prison cell and a short mattress for a very tall man, and gives one a sense of the kind of situation in which he lived. In the end, I think what I'm trying to say is that as long as we tell the public what we've done and are accountable and explain our rationale, it doesn't matter so much. But we do need to be able to say, this isn't authentic and here's why. So for me, it's not so much whether objects are authentic. Sometimes they can't be because they're too precious or too rare or too difficult to preserve. But then we need to state very clearly that these are a replica or whatever it is. So I don't know whether that answers the question at all. I think it's an issue of our own curatorial transparency, first and foremost.
Thank you very much. It does answer the question I had, because my question was also around the issue here. It's more of accessibility. Yes, we can never have everything to be authentic, because also things were in tear. Therefore, we can always provide an original picture of this is what it looked like. This is what we were able to come up with. It's not the exact original, but it's a replica. We're just using this to tell the story. So I just wanted to figure that if it's like an international phenomena or it's selective.
I think.
I'm sorry, can I jump in? I think it's a really interesting conversation, but I'm mindful of the time, and I know we all have bosses,
absolutely.
and I can see that a big boss has raised a hand in terms of Mike Turner, and I know that Shadrach is waiting in the background to moderate the report back session. So I wonder if that sort of like specific detail can be addressed on the sidelines. So apologies for that. Mike.
I did start to say something about authenticity, and authenticity is to authenticate the value. The first time the word appeared was in the Council of Trent, when they actually were having an argument between the Catholics and the Protestants, and saying that the authentic version would be the Vulgate. Well, it was not the original. The original was in Greek and in Hebrew. So what they were saying, they authenticated the value. So therefore, what we are doing is that we need to then say the value is in Robben Island. Where is the attribute? And the authenticity might be in, if the attribute of the value was in the material, then you might want to have it authentic as original. But otherwise, you might have the value is in the use, let us say. Therefore, you could change then some of the other aspects. And I think that this idea of changing our understanding of what is original, especially when we can have 3D printing, we can do copies. I think we should see this very much as what Walter Benjamin looked at about reproduction in the photographic age, reproduction in the digital age. And I think that rather than seeing that as a threat, I see this as an opportunity. Sorry, I probably had nothing. I spoke completely out of my hat and not relevant.
And I thought you were going to rein it all together because you were part of the bosses and you added to the conversation. So my bad. I think in between the original and the copy, there's much to be said, and I think I'm really, though I know I can see Mark wants to jump in.
No, I'll leave it because we're out of time. I was going to take it in another direction, so I'll leave it for the time being. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you all, and also merci à Franck GONNÉ for his really insightful reference to the methodology he uses in both Alexandria and Abidjan. Shadrach, are you in this room?
I can be if you want me to.
Oh, nice. Shadrach is here. You can take.
I'd like you to take over, I have to say.